Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the 94th episode of the Philly Blitz Pod. This is the Bo Allen, Haloti Nada, Josh Sweat episode. I'm Pierre Baptiste. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Markwell from Owens. Shout out to Parth. He's somewhere with his head in the book studying. Quell, how you doing, man?
Well, beloved, dub, man. I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling really good, brother. You know me, talk about Parfum. He's somewhere, but his head's in the book studying. I need to be. Somehow I found time for a podcast, but I need to be somewhere with myself in the middle of the grind, getting these scout reports written up.
Yeah, man. But as the title says, we can go ahead and hop into everything here. As the title of the pod says, it's never a dull day in Eagles land. This morning on Twitter, as a response, I guess, to Darius Slay on his podcast and some of the comments that he made yesterday, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, for lack of a better term, crashed out on the timeline this morning. There was a string of tweaks, again, in response to what Darius Slay said, and my biggest thing with this entire thing is none of this would be an issue if the drama was kept inside the locker room, right? And I mean, like, we know Darius Slay, like we were talking about in the chat earlier today, like, we know that he kind of has a propensity to just say things and he doesn't really think much about the outcome of what he could say, the outcome, what it could be. But I think, again, if all of this was kept inside the locker room, specifically from CJ's part, I don't think this would be much of a conversation. Like, I clearly think there's something deeper going on with Slay and CJ, and I think it goes back to Slay being on Micah's pod earlier in the season and the conversation that they had about CJ. But just overall, man, what are your thoughts on this situation?
I mean, I do think it probably what happened early on in the season with the Micah pod and things of that nature does probably play a factor in this. At the same time, my whole perception of everything is probably just a misunderstanding. It could be. I mean, we're not. You guys know me, like specifically you and Parf. When we have these conversations privately, I'd be the first to say, "Man, I'm the poster boy for mind your own business and stay out the way." My wife, she hates me for it. Every time some drama happening somewhere, I get half of a tea, or I'm supposed to be getting the tea for it. I get as minimal information as possible because I just don't want to know what's going on in other people's lives. You know, but in the same breath of saying that, I do think that we kind of went fishing and found what we were looking for with this in terms of everything. I think
So
that
wait. When you say we, you mean what do you mean?
us as fans, I do think.
I can't, brother. I can't get behind that, man. Like we were talking about today, bro. Like this didn't just spawn out of nowhere. Like
I
this,
mean, no, like I said, it we went fishing, and in order to go fishing,
I
there
don't
got to
think
be
we
some
went
fish
fishing.
somewhere.
It just popped up. We
I
didn't.
mean,
This isn't
they
generated by fans or media. This was the players.
Slay went on a podcast, and I think his comments were generally misconstrued by CJ. I mean, we had conversations about it afterwards and all that, and how what Slay said could be considering as backtracking and things of that nature. But I mean, I think we have a pretty lengthy at this point resume of seeing Darius Slay kind of say something before thinking, for lack of a better term, and it has got him in some pretty hot water. And I think this is just another case of those situations where I truly don't think. I mean, while I do think there could be something between them, I wouldn't be surprised if the case in this situation specifically. I don't think Darius Slay went out of his way to disrespect or slight Chauncey. It just like he kind of
I
mentioned with the whole leadership council and things of that nature. I do believe that Reed was the first person to pop up in his mind. Now, when you think about how the secondary is currently constructed, I mean, you can't misplace what was missing in that secondary last year. And if you
and not
did
not to
take
cut
a
you off. Not
chance,
not not to cut you off. That's my thing. Like you can't not mention CJ when you think about the Eagles secondary, right? Like we've heard, various players on the team, coaches too, like throughout the season, talk about the swagger that CJ brings, the attitude, like that element matters. And like it to me at least, it just seemed like he went out of his way to not say his name at all.
I mean, I can understand. That's why I said if it was something going on, I wouldn't be surprised. I can understand why someone says that he went out of his way. I just think it was ignorance, for lack of a better term, with all due respect. Just ignorance in his own Darius Slay part of how he kind of went about the question and the comments in general. Now, as you said, CJ kind of went out of his way to crash out on Twitter today, and I mean, I understand.
We should be shocked though. This is who
Yeah,
CJ is.
it's CJ. It's exactly who he is, and I mean, how I seen somebody put it on Twitter themselves is, I mean, I get what Darius Slay did. I don't think he necessarily meant to do this in the slightest way, but you got to understand that CJ one of those stand on business kind of guys, and if he feels disrespected, he gonna let it be known. And I think that he has let it be known. Now, I do think that, like you kind of said, situation probably it's easy to say that we keep the situation in house. The problem with keeping the situation in house is where's the house? I mean, CJ's in the house, he chilling in the house, but Darius Slay is not in the house right now. Darius Slay is a free agent. And I mean, I don't think this is similar. You could say that Slay was a free agent before, or he almost went to Baltimore. I don't think this is anywhere near similar to those circumstances, especially when you listen to Slay talk. I mean, hell, he got asked about the Commanders today and said that if the price is right, he'll be there. When he got asked about the Eagles a couple days ago, he said, if Philly talking what I'm talking, I'll be there. Like, I truly think that he's looking for one last payday, and there will be no hometown discount, no things of that nature.
I
So,
don't
I
think
mean,
I don't think the Eagles are going to be the team to give it to him
I
anyway.
don't either. I mean, we've seen this play out for the Eagles. I mean, we've had the conversation on podcasts about the whole James Bradbury thing and better getting off too early than too late type of conversations. And this will probably be the perfect time to get yourself off a slave, especially with him saying he only has one more year left. Now,
He's a 34-year-old corner, bro. You're gonna make me sound like Parth. I don't want to. Nah, I'm not willing to invest. We got away with it for 1 year, but aging corner who has already shown he barely can get through games without going to the locker room.
eat.
Nah.
That's the problem right there. Now, so considering the conversation that we're having right now, there is no house to keep this in. Right now, if you're Darius Slay, you you kind of keeping all things as real as possible. You ain't got no reason to hold back. You just answering questions. And Slay has never been the kind of guy to hold back when answering the questions in general. But I mean, he's kind of, if you ask me, he talking like a guy that's a free man. And
He's talking like one of those retired players who go on like Fox or like a Bleacher Report podcast.
Orlando Scandrick.
Well, no, I think I sent you the tweet earlier today when it was like, Slay is the homie you don't put as a reference when you apply to a job.
Like, cause he gonna tell the truth. He gonna tell, yeah, Pierre, yeah, he come to work late sometimes, and he be getting his assignments in late, but he a cool dude. Then wondering why you ain't get the job when they call Slay. But my bad, bro. I didn't even know, man. I didn't even know.
I just thought they was just asking. I just tried to tell them what.
Man.
Well, no, man. Back on CJ. Uh, just to wrap up here, I think CJ's leadership is 100% a plus. Like teams need a guy that can bring it, whatever the it is.
Yeah.
And CJ, he does that, and it's valuable. It's truly valuable. Like I said, we heard different players, different coaches, countless times this year talk about the impact. In terms of the attitude and swagger that he brings, and even the Super Bowl speeches, right? Like you could feel the passion off the screen, right? And to me, I think that stuff matters whether you want to acknowledge it or not. I think there are different roles for different guys. And like CJ tweeted this morning, like we saw how trying to replace him with a, I guess, perceived veteran or veteran presence and Kevin Byard, we saw how that worked out, right? And so I think what CJ brings to the table, yes, he has his warts as a player. I can't, count the timeless amount of times that we saw him get beat in the red zone, like so many different times this year. But he has his warts, but clearly what he brings to the table, it's not easily replicated.
That is is very true. And I mean, what I feel like this conversation is, and not just between you and I, but the whole thing between him and Slay as a whole, the conversation being held is something that you would have to agree to disagree because y'all are arguing two different things. It's like arguing who's a better point guard, Magic or Curry, when Magic was the pure passing guy and Curry's the scoring guy. Like we bring two completely different things to the table. When you think about Slay, we talk about how much he's meant to Q and things that like helping the younger players grow and things of that nature. Just we talked the whole time during the season when there was the conversation of do you think that we could trade Slay? And I'm like, nah, he's exactly those kind of guys that these kind of teams, these contending teams, look to bring in at this point of the year. Compared to CJ, I mean, like we kind of labeled him, he's the team crash out. And I mean, every team needs one of those guys. Everybody needs somebody that's going to be a tone setter, for lack of a better term, that's going to make you play with the specific attitude it takes to be successful in this
And
league.
we saw how it looked when they didn't have that guy last year. Like the image is permanently burned in my head of the 49ers at the link before the game, literally surrounding James Bradbury and nobody coming to his defense.
Him, it's hell. What I was about to say early on is if, if you could think of the whole 49ers game, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Commanders game. You've seen the way the defense turned when he got kicked out. We could talk about the Jalen injury and things of that nature. And yeah, the Jalen injury played a massive factor. But the defense was playing damn well until Chauncey got kicked out of that game. And we see how that turned out. And I don't think that was just a skill thing as to why there was a drop off. It was definitely an attitude missing on the defense there.
Yeah, and so just before we move to the Saquon and Zack Baun extensions, just as a bit of a wrap up here while we're on the secondary, do you think there's a conversation to be had at safety with CJ? I think he has no more guaranteed money on his deal after this year or after next year, one of the two. And then Reed Blankenship is entering the last year of his deal. And I think a couple, like maybe a week or two ago, I saw that the Eagles spoke with, was it Malachi Starks? Or was it the other safety?
It was probably, I think it was Malachi Moore.
Malachi Moore, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So is there a conversation to be had at safety, like in terms of additions or
I mean, yeah, there's definitely a conversation to be had. I'm not sure if there's is something that they'll go out their way to make an addition on this season if it's not in the NFL draft. Like, I don't think it's one of them things. I don't expect them to be active in free agency in general this year. But I mean, if you've had the chance to look around the mock draft scene or listen to some of the draft specialists out here, Daniel Jeremiah, I believe it was in his first mock draft, mocked the Eagles, Malachi Starks. So, I mean, we know we've had the conversation that, well, is how are we really going to draft a safety or a skill position player like that in this position in the first round? I mean, it remains to be seen, especially following the last offseason. All we can expect is just hold our breaths at this point. But I mean, I've seen them link to him. I've seen them link to Nick Emanuele from South Carolina. There are a few guys that I've seen the Eagles link to specifically in terms of safety because of what you just outlined specifically in the contract. Now, who do you think? I guess I'll reverse your question with who do you think is more likely to return in terms of next year when you have these contract conversations with Chauncey not having any guaranteed money and Reed coming up on the last year his deal? Who do you think they bring back?
out of those two, I honestly think it'd be Reed. I just talked about the enforcer type of role that CJ brings and everything like that, and it's important. It 100% is important. But at the same time, like Reed Blankenship is a damn good safety, like really good safety. He struggles in coverage, at times, but he's a really good safety. I
Man,
think we saw CJ struggle at times from a coverage standpoint. Early on in the season, he whiffed on a ton of tackles that led to big plays or explosive plays for opposing offenses. So I think if you were to ask me right now, I think it's Reed.
I feel like there are a lot that goes in a factor with those conversations, market
And
things
then
of that nature.
wait, but you also, I'm sorry, not to cut you off. You also have to factor in Cooper DeJean, right? Like
Right. And I was
chess
just about to
piece.
say that, like, there are a lot of things that go in the factor of that conversation. And all I could think about when I think about Reed, and I mean, I'm glad that he got the initial extension that he got. What was that, last year, or a few years ago? But the only thing I could think about when I think about Reed is he's our modern day TJ Edwards, man. He's really good for us at what we want to do. Damn good player at his position, and he's probably going to get paid somewhere. Hopefully, it's here. I'm not sure to be here, but when you think about exactly what the team got out of it, like it was kind of always like a low cost, high reward kind of thing where these undrafted free agents that you just bringing in and you getting a bunch of production from. But now when it's time to pay them, you start bringing up the conversations of, well, do you really think I can get you what your production is replicated? Now, I mean, if it comes down to what Darius Slay has to say, I mean, but Reed brings leadership to the locker room. So we got to take that into account right there. But I don't know. It'll be an interesting conversation. I think I'd probably lean Reed right now, probably because I think he'd have a cheaper market than CJ. But just in terms of the production and the player that you're getting, I don't know. That's an interesting conversation because I feel like there's a reason that they bought Chauncey back in the first place, and it wasn't just the attitude. Now that you got Vic Fangio back in the building, who was here before, granted on the offensive side, but you know.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue to our next topic. You know, you talked about a lot about whether the Eagles would take a guy like Malachi Moore, Malachi Starks at the end of the first round, and um, positional value and everything like that. Saquon Barkley and Zach Baun. The Eagles extended both of them earlier this week. They made Saquon Barkley the highest paid running back in NFL history. Zach Baun, his numbers were what, 3 years, 51 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just as a kickoff point here for me, I think we talk a lot about what do you say? Shout out Parth in the chat, man. We talk a lot about the philosophical shift that we've seen from Howie, and credit to Zach Berman for pointing this out. But how much of it is Howie shifting his philosophy from a roster construction or resource allocation standpoint versus just the types of players that Saquon and Zach Baun are, and just how special these guys are? Like we hear how we talk a lot about how special Saquon is, a special player, a special person, things of that nature. So, where do you stand on that?
For Saquon's aspect, I can agree. And this ain't me saying I don't think that Zach Bond is a special player. He's special for what we do and what we want to do and what we like to do. But I mean, I heard a saying early. I don't remember what I was watching, but I heard somebody say basically the Eagles were never in the business of paying you for what you have done. They are always in the business of paying you for what you're going to be in the future. And it's a lot of projection being done for Zach Bond, man. It's a great story, a damn good story, if you ask me. And in a perfect world, he becomes Vic Fangio's brainchild, everything that he ever expected from the position that he was able to build there. But we have one great year of production from him on tape.
And that's been my biggest kind of question or like talking point in my own head about this. Like, is there some risk involved? Like you said, like we've only seen 1 year of really good play. Like, is again, is there some risk involved with this?
It's certainly some risk, but I mean, I guess how I see it is the level of play that you've seen from him last season, specifically at the off-ball linebacker position. Off-ball linebackers are just, I almost said the bad word, man. Had the hand slap. But off-ball linebackers are just bad. They just hard to find, man. They are hard to find. Good ones, at least. You can find guys that they specialize at one thing or another and that you can use in a rotational place. But you look at, I mean, how happy Washington was to get a guy like Frankie Louvu in the building last year. How the difference that getting a guy like Roquan Smith from Chicago into that Baltimore defense, what they did, what that means to them. what that San Francisco defense looks like and doesn't look like when those linebackers are on and off the field. Like having those kind of players in those positions that be able to do those kind of things in this league today, it's important. It's important as hell. It cannot be understated. In the same breath of saying that, I mean, like I continued to outline when we had these conversations prior to the Baun extension, I mean, if there's anybody in this league that I trust to basically get the most out of the linebacker position, it's Vic Fangio. So, I mean, I'm happy that they paid Baun. I do believe Baun was the most important piece that they had to bring in. We'll have that conversation later on, but I'm happy that Baun is back. But it was always a thought in my head, and even if it wasn't in the first round, we know the Eagles don't spend capital of that nature on linebackers, but you know how he's famous for these third round linebacker picks. Just getting in a guy who I don't want to call him developmental, hell, maybe even developmental. You saw what they were able to do with Jalen Hunt last year out of the third round. But one of these guys
Davion Taylor, third round linebackers. Davion Taylor,
buddy, please don't remind me. That was actually what I had in mind when I thought about it. But just how he has shown a liking for third round linebackers, to say the least. But I mean, just getting a guy in that area, it would like a guy like Barrett Carter or something, someone who you know that if you put them in that spot, you probably could get some production from them and things of that nature, especially with Vic Fangio as the coach. But like I just said a second ago, what you got from Zack, it can't be understated. So I do think it's worth the risk. I mean, if you ask me, it was just, would you rather have the rookie there, or would you rather take the risk on Baun just going bad? Like, what would you rather been in the position for?
For me, I'd rather have the proven commodity there, right? Like, I think, we saw the level of play that Zack Baun, had under Vic Fangio last year. We saw the impact. He was the Defensive Player of the Year finalist, right? So for me, I think the fit was so perfect under Fangio, and just again the overall impact that he had on the entire unit. You couldn't not bring him back, right? Like you just said, of all their free agents or defensive free agents, he might have been the most important piece, right? Like it put me in the mind of how we always talk about Cooper DeJean and kind of how we say he was kind of made for the Vic Fangio defense, and how he's the prototypical Vic Fangio defensive back. Zack Baun might be the prototypical linebacker, because of his IQ, because of his versatility, like you talked about, the ability to play off ball. He can also play inside. Just his overall fit in the defense, like it made it to where you had to bring him back, right?
Definitely, man. And I mean, we had the conversation. I don't remember if it was last pod or the pod before that, where I mean, and just in terms of, and I guess, well, we can touch on Saquon before I say this, but the Saquon extension, I'm not really a capologist, so I'm not sure exactly what it does. I know for a fact it gives the Eagles a little bit more wiggle room in terms of money, right? In terms of money to work with, so that's a plus, especially heading into the year where we were sitting here having conversations with nitwits on Twitter that told us the Eagles can't pay people, they don't have any money, but whatever that.
Bro, imagine being a fan of a broke team. Like, imagine your favorite team not having no money.
It's not even the fact that your favorite team would our favorite team got money. Just imagine your favorite team didn't know how to manage money like us,
like the Saints.
Like, buddy, I'm glad the Rams got out of this business. They stopped saying F them picks and start investing into some of these players. Which, I mean, when you look at this Eagles team, it's kind of a similar aspect. We laugh at all of the $20, $30 million players they have on the offense, but we also pointed out that this was the youngest defense in football this season. So you got to be able to make it. It's all about making quality investments, depending on whether it be draft capital, trades, free agency, man.
And it's kind of reminiscent of like how he even last year, and I know he said it this year too, but the young guys have to play, right? Like, if you're going to spend money, big money at, these skill positions, you're going to have to draft and develop really well. And you're going to have to depend on, your younger players to make an impact from day one. And we're gonna get into this later, but I think we saw that from guys like Moro Jomo, Jalix Hunt, even the guy like Oren Burks who stepped up in the Kobe Dean's absence. But just getting impact from your younger guys. I think that's paramount for this team. But just on Saquon, to me, this is very simple, right? Like you make him the highest paid running back ever. You add $10 million of cap relief. You reward him for a historic season.
You don't pay for those.
You said what?
We don't pay for those.
What you mean?
We don't pay for past production.
I mean, I don't think you can say this was one of those situations though, right? Like the guy legit had a historic season and capped it off with a Super Bowl win. I think there was some sort of like, hey, you did all that for us. Let's give you a payday.
No, that's a damn good question right there. I guess we can find a way to tie the Eagles into this. But just how lucky are we in sense of you look at some of these other teams and some of the moves that are being made and that have been made over the last few years, where it's like, I mean, we could get to Burrow in a second in the Bengals, like the question outlined, but just imagine, and I mean, this turned out well. Hell, they won almost 3 Super Bowls in a row, almost. But you look at a team like the Chiefs, who, when Mahomes on that rookie deal, you have Kelsey, you have Hill, you have this young defense that you would have you have molded towards the future. If you're looking at Howie Roseman, man, and you got the young quarterback, and that's that weaponry around him, you can only imagine that he would have found a way to get that done, man. To keep him surrounded with his talent, and you to look at what's going on around the league to some of these quarterbacks, some of these franchises where it's like, I mean, you do spend all this time building a competent team, and we talk about championship window. Hell, we keep talking about this 3-year window for us, where I think we're spoiled on our front because Howie has done, and he's proven from 2017 to 2022 to 2024 now, where he's able to build these rosters, go through overturn, but still keep the team competitive. And that's not something that a lot of these teams could say. Like, I think about that Bengals defense, quite frankly, all the time, where they were when they had Lou Anarumo at his peak with all of the guys that he had to work with, where they was just giving Patrick Mahomes hell. And slowly but surely, up until the final nails was in the coffin over today with the release of, my God, Sam Hubbard, man. Go Bucks. But I can't believe this is going on, man. Just tragic day. But release of Sam Hubbard, eventually retirement, Trey Hendrickson asking out. It's like, how do we get to this point if you're the Bengals, man? You had it all. And it's never hard to repeat, but to look at how young everybody, like, they had the inverse of us where they had to pay their guys on defense, but what you had offensively, the young quarterback, the young receivers, no, they ain't talking about paying them until right now. Like, how did you blow this if you're Cincinnati?
And didn't they traded Jonah Jackson too, right?
I'm not sure if they traded him. I think they let him walk.
But yeah, like, it's just not every team can have Howie Roseman as their GM, right? Like, you just talked about it, right? Like, to have as much talent as Cincinnati did, and now you're at a point where, like, hey, you got to start paying these guys. Even with Dallas, right? Like, you're not going to be able to pay everybody, right? Again, every team can't have, Howie Roseman as their GM. So I think, for us as fans, we should be grateful for what we're seeing, right? Like, this level of general managing, it's not normal across, the NFL, right? And it always puts me in the mind of, like I said a couple pods ago, right? Like, some of these teams across the NFL, they're desolate, right? Like, yeah, you're talented, but it's not sustainable. It's not consistent.
But how much of this? Because I mean, for especially in Cincinnati's part, all I ever think about when I think about the Bengals is when they first drafted Joe, or were getting ready to draft Joe, and Carson Palmer went on some radio station and basically begged him, "Please don't go there. They are cheap. They not gonna pay for nobody."
Bro,
Basically,
don't
predicted
they
the situation that he's in now.
don't they practice at like their actual stadium because they don't have a practice facility, or they just built a practice facility like 2 years ago or something like that?
I don't know, man. I just know that they run their franchise very strange, and they've always been this kind of franchise where, I mean, what are you being so cheap for? I guess it's not like you can take the money home or anything. It has to get allocated somewhere. It gets rolled over into next year. I don't know. It has to be more to it because I'm not sure if you've had the chance to look at Brett Coleman. Brett Coleman dropped this video basically speaking about how the NFL and the salary cap how it went up, and how something about how Jeffrey Lurie and him might selling a minority stake of the team. All this, all that plays a factor into why we're able to play the long game with these contracts like we are. So it's a lot that goes into it, man.
And then I also think it kind of dives into Jeffrey Lurie and his ownership style, just in terms of not just the money that he gives Howie to bankroll the entire operation, but just I think like their investment in the cap room side of things, right? Like I think this is the Honest NFL account. I can't remember when they tweeted it, but like no team like implores or invests more into like figuring out how the cap works than the Philadelphia Eagles front office, right? Like they have specific guys, like I don't remember the dude's name, but they have specific guys
No,
just for researching different ways to manipulate the cap.
you're 100% correct. I mean, Partha tell you, I remember, I never forget when we had Brad Spielberg, friend of the pod, formerly of Pro Football Focus, on, and he basically told us in year one, like, we were sitting here talking about firing Howie Roseman and why the Eagles can't get it right in the draft and things of that nature. And he like, a lot of the teams in the NFL are trying to copy what the Eagles are doing front office
Yeah,
wise because they're just so far ahead of the game. And we looked at each other when he said it, like, really? So to see specifically from that conversation to where we've come to as a franchise over the course of those, let's say 5 to 7 years, it's kind of speaks volumes to not just Howie and the guys that he surrounded himself with, but Jeffrey Lurie and the empire, for lack of a better term, that he has built. How he's took a franchise that was, I'll use your term, desolate for a lot of the early stages of it, and he invested in it not just on the field, but he's trying to figure out every way, shape, or form to give his team a formative advantage.
yeah,
And it starts in the front office.
yeah. And I don't just back to Howie. I don't think Howie's issue was ever cap related or the
No, no, no. He was
spending
always a
wise.
money
It was
guy.
always the draft. Yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, not even just the draft. It was
evaluation,
some
talent
of
evaluation.
the draft came to be his end all be all when we had those conversations. It was just how he chose to approach the team building style where it were too many band-aids. Like I feel like if there was one thing that he learned from his first stint to now is you can't be afraid to take the coup de grace. You got to take the big swing sometime. And even granted, you saying take the quote unquote big swing. I was just saying today, I was having a conversation with Shavin earlier about what makes Howie so good is he's so damn good along the margins. When we were sitting here talking about go sign Jarius Byrd and TJ Ward, he swung Malcolm Jenkins. When we were sitting here talking about going to go get some of those big fish at defensive tackle, he brings in Tim Jernigan, and then he brings in Javon Hargrave, like some of the mid-tier guys in the market who, by the time they reach their next contract, they're going to be max contract guys, and we're getting them as they're on their way up. Those kind of swings. But even aside from that, while he made those kind of swings that first go round, it was too many Sam Bradfords and too many
That was a
Lugeri.
chip. That was a chip thing, though. Don't put that on Howie. Don't do that.
I just named a random quarterback. I'm sorry if you want me to get into the general specifics of the moves that he was making. Leotis McKelvin and hell stuff like that. Like specifically at the cornerback position. That's the cornerback and wide receiver. He learned that if you're going to pay to play in this league, you got to have dudes at those two positions in this league, which is why you see investments for AJ Brown and see investments for Devonta Smith. And it wasn't an overnight thing. We won a Super Bowl, but he was still in the midst of learning. Because if you look at that 2017 roster, where I mean, he made the investment for Alshon Jeffrey, but that was still another one of those mid-tier swings where I mean, y'all are probably swinging a little higher, but we'll swing for Alshon, and we think we can get more production from him. And you're looking at Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, who's on a 1-year deal, like some of these marginal moves that we were winning with. But now he's building long-term rosters.
And I think it's just the overall like evolution of how we as a GM, right? Like I hadn't thought about that. Like the thinking behind signing, Alshon back in 2017 versus now being willing to swing a trade for a guy like AJ Brown a year after drafting a Devontae Smith, or even last draft, like being willing to, break tendency and draft two defensive backs in the first round and second round. I think it just goes to show just the overall evolution of how we were. It's not just, we're like, this is still the main thing. Like, we're going to build through the trenches, but not being afraid to, like you say, make the big swing at the other positions.
But see, being able, and this is why I get so mad when we talk about teams like the Miami Dolphins, who they invest so much into these skill position players. And I'm like, it's cute. It look fun. I'm going to play with you on Madden and everything. But like, when we talk about real, actual Sunday football or January football, if you're not a team that's building your team through the trenches,
you can't win. You're not going to win.
It's not even just that you can't win on the field. Literally, you won't win because you look at some of the moves, like how we talk about him drafting Quignon and Coop in back-to-back rounds. You're not able to do that if you don't invest highly into the trenches like he does. Like we talk.
I mean, they just won a Super Bowl because of their playing the trenches, right? Like, boom. It's Nolan Smith, Jalen Hunt, Jalen Carter, like
back and back to back and back. Yeah. And I mean, you look at team like when Dallas was in the middle of that run when they first got Zeke and Dak. What was so notable about that is, if cool, they finally drafted the cool positions. But for the last 5 years, they just spent first round picks on Zack Martin and Travis Frederick and all of these offensive linemen that is going to be the pivotal point of this team. And a lot, like you even look at Chicago, what Ben Johnson just did immediately as soon as they got here. They went to fortify the offensive line. If you don't solidify your trenches, you don't allocate yourself the chance to work anywhere else.
Yeah. But I think with that, we can move to free agency. So I think what we can do for this segment, we can look at the Eagles' own free agents and play a game of stay or go, right? I'll say a player, and then we'll go stay or go. So let's get into that.
Let's go.
Josh Sweat.
Go.
I think he's priced himself out of the Eagles' budget.
Even him, and I mean, I'm assuming the next player you would say is Milton Williams. He would also be a go. It's not even just that those guys, while they have priced themselves out of the Eagles' budget, just with the conversation we had about investment in the trenches, like this defensive line class is so deep where if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you can come to the poker table and tell them that, I mean, we drafted you, didn't we? Like, that we invest highly in these positions and we draft well at these positions. So if you think that we can't find somebody to replace you, you'd be sadly mistaken. So you kind of got to play our ball game. And I mean, a lot of them probably aren't going to be the kind of guys to play our ball game because this is the first time they're going to get to make top dollar. But I don't think that they've put themselves in a position to have any leverage against the Eagles.
Yeah. Mekhi Becton.
Oof, that's fun.
Now, I said go in the article that I released this morning. By the way, go check that out.
You got to stay to that, man. It ain't even been 24 hours, man. You can't switch.
I said go in the article, too.
Oh, I thought you were saying you about to switch from go. No. I was about to say, man, you got to stay true.
Yeah, no, I said go. But I think it's dependent on the price because I do think some team is going to pay him to play tackle after the resurgence that he had this year. Like we just talked about how important, fortifying the trenches are. I think some team is going to pay him to play tackle. And then also I say go because the Eagles drafted Tyler Steen in the 3rd round for a reason, right? Like they obviously saw something in him to where they think he can be a plus starter on the offensive line at some point.
I agree. At the same time, I mean, if it's one thing I know about this Eagles team is they aren't afraid to acknowledge their mistakes. It's the same team that invested a first round pick in Andre Dillard and then invested a 7th round pick in Jordan Mailata and went with the 7th round pick and told
But I
you,
mean,
I'm sorry, I was wrong.
but we've seen Tyler play, and he wasn't
I mean, yeah,
necessarily
he's not a
bad.
scrub. He's not a scrub.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that it's not a chance that somebody like what you said. I have never. You've said it a few times, and to be quite frank, I don't ever think about it until you say it. It never crosses my mind. I'm intrigued by the fact of a team actually paying him tackle money, Mekhi Becton, that is. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that teams, I mean, it's a copycat league. And they seen the success he had at guard. They seen the struggles he had at tackle and how playing guard was able to minimize a lot of those. Just him being able to operate within that phone booth and still showcase the athleticism that made him a star coming into the league, for lack of a better term. I don't think that a move to tackle is in his future. And if it's a guard payment that he's going to get paid, I don't see a reason that he's not back in Philadelphia because same way I said it's a deep defensive line class, it's a deep interior offensive line class. Like a lot of your favorite offensive tackles in this class can probably play guard and probably will play guard at the next level. So, I mean, if you're a team with interior offensive line needs, you shouldn't be. You're either going to take massive big swings, just like the Bears just did on day one to solidify those needs, or you standing tall until the draft day because you got the arsenal right then and there. And the question is, do you view Mekhi Becton as one of those big swings on day one?
all right. So moving along here, Avante Maddox, go.
Oh, get the hell out of here, man!
Britton Covey. Is this a conversation?
It's real conversation. It's actually a real conversation because I mean, we can't act like he wasn't productive prior to this season, and we also can't act like he wasn't penciled in for a massive role in the offense prior to his unlucky injury history this year. So they clearly viewed highly of him. Now, the real conversation here is what do you think you can get in the return game? Because I'm sure, just like we watched games, I'm sure you tweeted it, but we've all watched games and seen Cooper DeJean returning these punts, and we held our breath like, please stay healthy, buddy. So, having a guy in Britton Covey that can take the load off, it will be important.
Yeah, I don't want Coop back there returning punts, bro. I don't want it. As cool as it is seeing him, lock down the slot receiver and then go back.
That 50-yard punt return against Dallas, I believe it was. Cinema. Don't never do it again.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see, but long term, nah. And then, of course, you got your guys like Jack Driscoll, Paris Campbell, Raven Clark, C.J. Osama. All of those guys would go. I don't think there's a conversation to be had there.
I just want to tell those guys congratulations on becoming a Super Bowl champion. I hope, what's the WWE term? Best of luck in your future
endeavors. All right. Oren Burks. I had him as a stay in my article. I think it depends on the market, though. Like if what we saw from him during the playoff run, if some team looks at him and says, hey, this guy can come be an average starting linebacker for us, then I don't think you're going to break the bank. But if it's affordable, I think you do it. I mean, like again, we saw his play in N'Kobe's absence.
I don't think he's back. I think someone's going to pay for, like you said, average starting linebacker pay. And I mean, you got to start somewhere if you're a franchise. I don't think he's exactly the guy that he put on tape throughout the course of that playoff run or N'Kobe's injury. I think the talent around him and the scheme itself kind of put him in a very good position. So good luck to the team that decides to pay him.
Isaiah Rodgers. I said stay.
That's a really good question. I mean, that in itself, it goes into its whole conversation. Like, do you let him and Ringo battle it out? Do you give the
Draft
job
a
to
guy.
Ringo? I mean, that's was the next option. I mean, I don't know how active you've been in the draft world so far this off season, but a lot of Eagles Twitter is heavy on the bring me Ben
Ben
Morrison.
Morrison, yeah. I
So
watched a little bit of him, little bit. But no, on Isaiah, I mean, my dislike of small corners, guys under 6'1". I'm not really a fan of, but again, he's small. But I think you also have to consider the fact that number one, he knows the defense, he knows the scheme, he knows the system, and he's shown he can play when called upon. Right, like we talked about talked about at the top of the pod. Darius Slay, I can't count, how many times he went to the locker room during the season, during the playoffs, things of that nature. And Isaiah Rodgers, he was routinely the first person up off of the bench, right? And you would think it'd be Keeley, considering they drafted him in the fourth round and he's young and everything like that. But Isaiah Rodgers was the guy, called upon. So I think that has to count for something.
yeah,
And again,
but
I think
you
it's
having the Nick Foles conversation right here. Like the Nick Foles conversation is what I like to call we won with him, but if I sat here and told you that Darius Slay never existed on that Eagles team last year and all of his great play when he was there, and Isaiah Rodgers was the starting cornerback for all 18 weeks or 17 weeks, however many games there are, and offensive coordinators had the opportunity to game plan the fact that Isaiah Rodgers was going to be in the game instead of him just being thrust into play. Do you think we get the same results from Isaiah Rodgers?
no, I don't.
So I mean, it's fun saying that. Yeah, well, he played well when he got in the game. I mean, yeah, he also was thrust in the weird situations, and I mean that's not easy on him either. Just like it's hard on the offensive team because they didn't scout for this. It's not. It's hard on him. He just came in cold, and now he got to cover a stud receiver. What do you expect from him? And he did his thing at the same time. If teams can get on film your weaknesses for a week to week basis, if you think that they're not going to find a way to attack that, especially come playoff time, you're sadly mistaken.
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation that's going to be had in the Eagles building and just for, fans or media in general, just looking at the cornerback position outside of Quinyon and Cooper DeJean, like
Man,
you
they,
just
they
said.
mean so much, brother. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
fact that they have
Yeah.
solidified the nickel position and the outside corner one position, it allows like we can have the conversation like we
Hmm.
had at the top to say, well, we're not bringing Slay back. If they don't bring Slay back, we're good. What we gonna do next at the position? Like, could you imagine this conversation 10 years ago?
Well, yeah, man. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Like, Keely Rango, seems like he's been waiting in the wings for,
I
what has it
must
been,
I
three
must say,
years?
I'm glad you said that. Christian Parker was asked, I believe it was Christian Parker. Christian Parker was asked which defensive back he believed improved the most throughout the course of the season during this time this year. His answer was Keely Ringo. So, I mean, we didn't see a lot of Keely, but it sounds like he took some time turning heads.
Yeah, and having a guy like a Christian Parker, like a Joe Casper, is safeties or is he just defensive backs? I think he's
I
safeties.
think I had to look. I thought he was just defensive backs, but I had to
Yeah,
look.
so having those guys, and not only just a Vic Fangio, but for a guy like Keeley who has all the physical traits, the size, the speed, the height, the weight, things of that nature. It's just the technical side of the position that he kind of lacks or lacked. Having those guys as coaches and getting to spend a year working with them, on the practice field, I do think that's a huge plus for him, and I think we could see the benefits or the results of that in training camp. But then again, it's just what they decide to do outside of him. Like, do you bring back Isaiah Rodgers? Do you look to draft the corner early? So it's
I
going to
mean,
be interesting to see what happens.
I feel like it kind of goes into the conversation we just finished having and the quote unquote the evolution of Howie Roseman. That's been the most beautiful thing about this is granted we like to argue Jalen Hurts is an elite quarterback and he was worth the investment when he was. But I mean, it's worth noting that Howie took the time to reach out and acquire about Russ, acquire about Nasty Man Watson and things of that nature. Like He if there's anything that Howie Roseman has shown, or like you just said a second ago, being able to have drafted Devonta Smith a year ago and then trade for AJ Brown the next year, he has shown that if there's a way to upgrade the roster, he will do it. And that doesn't mean he doesn't believe in what he has in house. His job is just to build the best possible roster, best roster possible. So I mean, I think it's a really interesting conversation at cornerback too. Because if you ask me, I truly think they want Keeley to get the job, especially with all the Georgia guys there. Like they want them to play together. How he spoke about how important it was, how fun it is for him to watch what was arguably the greatest defense in college football history, and he has accumulated all of them or most of them, like just a bunch of treasure chest pieces, and he's building a great defense himself. So I think they'd love to see Keeley win the job. But if kind of like last year, a guy like Q just falls into their lap, what are they supposed to do? Not take him?
Yeah. But just moving along here, Kenneth Gainwell. And I know this might surprise you and Parth. Shout out to him in the chat again. But I say stay.
Oh man. And I see, man.
It depends. A lot of these guys is dependent on the market. It's dependent on the market. What other teams are willing to pay you? Because a guy like Kenny, for this Eagles team, he's the perfect change of pace back. Like he's shown the ability. He can run behind this offensive line. He can pass block. He's a good receiver out of the backfield. So he's a plus.
Huh? You getting caught again. You getting caught in the same trap that I got caught in. And now you know I love Kenny, man. I'm probably Kenny's biggest supporter on this podcast. But a lot of that support, I mean, aside from the fact that I scouted him, I realized who he always was. But a lot of that support came from that 2022 playoff run and seeing what I allocated as playoff Kenny. Like he turned his game up to another level that year. And when you watch Kenny in the playoffs this year, again, he kind of took he a big game player. How we consider Jalen Hurts to be a big game player, Kenny Gainwell is one of those guys. He turned it up when the lights shine on the brightest. Now, when you talk about an 18-game season of Kenny Gainwell, we've watched that 3 times, 3 years in a row, and it was so up and down and inconsistent. The best thing, my biggest argument that I always held on to, even when it was by the thinnest of margins, everybody's trying to kick me off the boat. And I'm like, but wait, he can pass block, you guys. He can pass block. Don't kick me off yet. Like that's all I can hang on to. But I mean, when you think about what they have or what they selected in Will Shipley, who, I mean, he's not too shabby in the pass blocking department himself either. He's not Kenny yet, but I think he can get to where Kenny is someday. When you think about how deep this running back class is, there are a lot of reasons to point to, well, I think we could kind of find a Kenny replacement. Now, they've shown a history of appreciating what they have at backup running back, hence why Boston Scott was able to stick around for so long. They appreciate what some of those guys bring to the room. So maybe Kenny can get lucky, but I think Kenny might be a go.
Yeah, so moving on. Fred Johnson. I said stay. You think go?
Yeah.
Why you say that?
Fred Johnson, I mean, I kind of just spoke about the whole Mekhi Becton thing and why I believe he will stay. And that kind of works directly to the whole Tyler Steen thing where we worked you at guard when we had injuries, but I also believe that they think he could step in and play right tackle in the event of an injury and things of that nature.
I think as an organization, I think they might view him as the swing tackle, which is why I think he'll be back.
No, I was talking about Tyler Steen when I said that.
Okay.
So I feel like they feel like Steen could fill a lot of those roles. I don't know how they feel about Steen at left tackle, which is, I mean, we have seen Fred Johnson fill in there admirably. So there is the one conversation. But in terms of the rest of the roles on the offensive line, I think Steen could fill those pretty well. And it kind of correlates to the whole Mekhi Becton being back thing.
Yeah, and then we got one more guy, the biggest free agent. This is the most crucial piece of the puzzle. Rick Lovato.
Oh, you got to bring him back.
Yeah,
you got to bring him back. I know you saying game. I believe he got hurt one game, and they had Dallas Goedert making snaps, brother. I know you seen that game. Like, nah, bro, go pay Rick. Go pay Rick. Rick got to get paid. Got to have the long snapper.
Yeah, maintain special teams continuity. But in terms of additions, we're kind of breezing through this. We're almost at 55 minutes. But in terms of additions, what are you thinking? I mean, I think we can potentially expect to move at defensive tackle with the loss of Milton Williams. I think they might look at a guy like a Draymond Jones who has
That's exactly what I was going to
familiarity.
bring up.
Yeah, he has familiarity with Fangio and with Clint Hurt. Um, I think edge is a possibility. Khalil Mack, he's on the market. I know he's older, but he's still shown he can play a little bit. And they need bodies at edge / outside linebacker. Like the only two guys you have on the roster right now that are like legitimate players are Jalen Hunt and Nolan Smith. So I think they're going to add bodies some guys. You got wait, what was that?
I'm sorry, that was that was Pierre talking to Pierre.
Yeah, you got Khalil Mack out there. Another guy I had in my article this morning was Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. I think he'd be a really nice fit in this Fangio defense, like from an athleticism standpoint. He's shown he can rush the passer a little bit. He can drop in coverage if you ask him to. Really good run defender, nice size. And then Baron Browning, he was an interesting name that popped up. I know that the Broncos drafted him with Vic Fangio when he was their head coach, and I think he used him as an inside backer, right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and so
he was the initial Zack Baun.
Yeah, so yeah, there's a connection there, and it just depends, man. What's the market on these guys? Like, I think for sure you can pencil them in for a move at D tackle or edge, but again, it's just how much are they willing to spend?
Certainly, man. I was definitely going to bring up a guy like Draymond Jones. That's the one that stands out to me the most, especially with his connection to both Fangio and Hurt. Where, I mean, it's interesting because you can see the Eagles kind of investing in the defensive line come draft day, depending on how exactly the board falls. But that's exactly the kind of guy that I envision, that kind of conversation where we was just having when I said between the margins, where you bring in a guy like Draymond Jones, who, I mean, of course.
It's kind of, not to cut you off, it's kind of reminiscent of the Javon Hargrave signing from, what year was it, 2019, 2020?
Yeah, they're all reminiscent of each other to me. Hargrave reminded me of Jernigan. He just seems to find these low-key defensive tackles who are on the brink.
And Jones himself, I think he can kind of replicate some of what Milton Williams gave you in terms of versatility, being able to be used as like a pseudo edge rusher and inside pass rusher at D tackle. Again, it just depends on what his market is.
Oh, also the best thing about Draymond Jones. OH. Man, finally getting me some Buckeyes involved, man. I feel like Parth out here.
Well, all right. I think I have one more question, and then we can wrap up. This has been floated a lot in a lot of the Eagles, like podcasts and media and everything like that. The Dallas Goedert conversation. Do you think there's an extension, a trade, or like is there a conversation to be had about what they do with him this year, this offseason? Because I think he has 1 year left on his deal.
No. I think they let him go into the last year of his deal on the best, the same way they let Zach Ertz do. And kind of one of them things where if we can get a deal done with you that's team friendly, sure. But there's a conversation to be had, man. I mean, you got to stay on the field. The best ability is availability. And I mean, he did himself damn wonders with the playoff run that he had this past postseason. But I mean, again, we don't pay you for past production. We pay you for what you could possibly be. And when you talk about a guy who could barely stay on the field in his younger age, now probably just another year older. And when you look at some of these the tight end class, I think they invest in the position this year. And they kind of let the whole Zach Ertz thing play. I mean, they let the whole Dallas Goedert thing play out. and then we'll see how it goes next year.
Little Evan Ingram action possible, you think?
No,
He got cut today.
I think he's too small for what they want to do offensively.
Yeah.
He's just a slot receiver.
But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this episode. I think we touched on everything we had on the itinerary. Just before we get out of here, one other thing I wanted to address. What is up with people on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, coming into your mentions on a tweet and telling you that your opinion is wrong? Like, I know it's Twitter that typically happens, but
Well, Pierre, what do you want them to say? You were
like,
incorrect.
But no, I'm like, bro, like, this is my show. Like, how you gonna tell me how I should feel on my account?
Because everybody has an opinion, just like everybody has an asshole. And right now, they feel like you're being an asshole because making that dumb statement that you just made. Like, why would you even say that?
Well, yeah, man, I think that's going to do it for this episode. We're going to release this as a pod tomorrow. So if you're listening after the stream on whichever podcast streaming platform you're listening on, be sure to leave us a like and a review. Rate us 5 stars. I think Parth will be back for the next episode. I'm not sure if he's still in the chat. But appreciate
Next
you, brother.
episode, I will probably be running on coffee and films. It's time to get this show on the road.
Yeah. Got scouting reports, mock drafts. I'm going to try to get my first mock draft done. I disagree with that comment. Parth is a vital part of the Philly Blitz family. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Shout out to all 86 of you who tapped in for the stream.
85.
Go Birds.
The 6th one was just Parth.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.